Hey folks, thanks for returning for the 7th video in my 10 video series. This one is about sleep management. This is a critical component of my protocol. Without good sleep management, a lot of the other things in this program don't work at all. So please take a good look at this one and enjoy. Okay then, let's dive into sleep management. It's absolutely essential for good health to have good sleeping habits. Just to have a healthy lifestyle is not enough. You've got to be getting plenty of sleep in order for the restoration process that goes on during your sleep to take place. Most people don't get enough sleep, and they have no idea actually what sort of effect that's having on them long term. Long-term sleep deprivation has all sorts of side effects. One in particular is that if you are trying to lose weight, it doesn't really matter what your nutritional diet is like, but if you're not getting sufficient sleep, it's going to be very difficult to lose weight because it's going to affect your hormone balances. So if you go to visit a doctor, you're suffering from being overweight or obesity or whatever, it's very rarely does a doctor say to you, well, maybe it's your sleep habits that are causing you to gain weight, or perhaps not to lose weight. So if your nutrition is in good shape, but you're not getting enough sleep, that can still have a negative effect on weight loss. Sleep deprivation can give you things like insulin resistance that we talked about in video 1. We can end up aging faster. Of course, we've talked about fat storage many times, but not getting enough sleep can affect that as well. And it can also affect your immune system. Once you start disrupting your immune system, of course, as we've talked about before in previous videos, all sorts of things can go wrong. And I suppose at the top of the list of issues that get caused by sleep deprivation are metabolic diseases. So as you see, it's a common theme as we go through these videos. All the things that we are missing out on as it relates to the sleep and the food and so on and so forth, exercise, you end up in this sort of vicious cycle where they all sort of lead back to the same place, where you end up with disease. Ideally, a healthy adult should get 7 or 8 hours sleep a night. If you deprive yourself of sleep for some period of time, then it's quite likely that you can't catch up. I mean, if you're just having 3 or 4 hours of sleep a night, you can't necessarily catch up by having a 10-hour sleep the next night. And that, of course, will mess up your circadian rhythms, which we'll talk about later. But the whole purpose of the sleep process is to restore. So the purpose of sleep really is to be restorative, meaning that it's going to restore your memory, or at least put things in the right places in the memory so that you can be reminded of those things. And of course, from a physical point of view, if you've had a hard day physically, a lot of the restoration associated with muscles and ligaments and things of that nature get restored during your night's sleep as well. Now, sleep goes in cycles, and there are 3 components to the sleep cycle. There's the light sleep, there's the deep sleep, and there's the REM sleep. These cycles usually start off with the light sleep. This is kind of like a twilight zone, if you will. Your eyes are closed, your body's more or less asleep, but your brain is still a little bit active. And then you have the deep sleep, which is the part that's going to restore the physical components of your body. And then you have the REM sleep, where you typically are dreaming, and during this sleep your brain is figuring out what happened during the course of the day and slotting various things into long-term or short-term memory spots, so you have reasonable recollection going forward and your memory is in good shape. Now, I try to shoot for about 10 cycles a night. Of course, that's not something you can really control, but I do monitor my sleep with a sleep app, And I find that when I've had a good night's sleep and I look at the results on the graph, it usually comes out at around about 8, 9, maybe 10 cycles. If I have a night's sleep that only includes 1 or 2 cycles, I usually recognize that the next day by just not really feeling myself. I also try very hard not to have any alcohol before I go to bed, or any caffeine for that matter too. So I always try to give myself 3 hours between having anything to eat or to drink, especially alcohol or coffee. Try and cut them all out at least 3 hours before I go to bed, so that they are out of my system and are not going to affect my sleep patterns. So if my sleep is such that I don't get enough REM sleep, it's likely that when I get up the next day and try to recall things, it's going to be a little sketchy. Not to say that I can't find these things, but they're not going to immediately come to the front of my memory. They're in there somewhere, but maybe the links are not quite as good as we would like them to be. Of course, if I haven't had enough deep sleep, especially if I've had an active day the day before, then probably still going to have some aches and pains. My muscles might be sore, my tendons might be tight. So if you're not getting enough deep sleep, it's going to affect you physically as well. Now, it's considered that what I would refer to as the money sleep is the first 4 hours of sleep that you get. During that period of time, you have some of your deepest sleep, and if you can get 4 hours in without waking up at the beginning of your sleep period, then you are certainly going to feel a whole lot better for it. I try to go to bed by about 10 o'clock, and so my money time, as it were, is between about 10 and 2. So hopefully I don't get woken up for any reason during that period of time, and if that's the case, then I can reasonably expect to have a great night's sleep. So back in the day of our ancestors, when we were hunter-gatherers, the cycles, day and night cycles, the season cycles, whatever, had quite a big impact. Obviously they didn't really want to be out there hunting and gathering when it was dark, because they wouldn't be able to see what's going on. And there were certain periods of the year, whether that be the summer where perhaps things are more plentiful, or the winter where things are not so plentiful. And so there would be a tendency for these folks to get all their activities in, and hunting and gathering and so on during the plentiful periods, typically in the summer, and then during the winter periods, typically when it's a lot darker, they would get more rest and build up for the next year. Today, as we don't have to hunt and gather necessarily to survive, and we're not fighting off wild animals and so on, it's our environment and our lifestyle that basically affect the cycles. So these cycles or rhythms are referred to as circadian rhythms. They affect when we go to sleep, when we wake up, when we are eating and digesting, elimination and so on. And it's a really good idea to try and keep the circadian cycles in some kind of rhythm. Now, trying to go to bed at roughly the same time each day and get up at the same time each day, and to be eating meals at roughly the same time each day, goes a long way to keeping these cycles consistent. Because if you swap things all over the place and get up at random times, or go to bed at random times, or eat at random times, any of these things, then your poor old circadian cycle or rhythm isn't really going to be able to figure out what's going on. And as a result, if you get those feelings where you just don't feel right, everything feels out of whack, well, that's a pretty good chance that your circadian cycle has been interrupted in some way, and the body gets confused and doesn't really know what to do. So a good example of the disruption of a circadian rhythm is jet lag. If you've traveled to various parts of the world where the time difference is significant, you may have found that when you get to that location, that everything seems out of sorts. You're kind of tired when you should be awake, and vice versa, and then you're sort of hungry right before you want to go to bed, or you're not hungry at normal meal times and so on. And so you just don't feel right for some period of time, that is, of course, until you adjust. Well, jet lag is an example of a circadian rhythm disruption, if you will. And one of the problems is for a lot of people is because of their lifestyle and the environment that they live in, that they are permanently on jet lag 24 hours a day. Well, the problem with that, or one of the problems with that, is if you do it often enough, or you have that feeling often enough, it starts to feel normal. So this being out of whack kind of gets to be normal, and you don't notice it anymore. So until you do something to correct your circadian rhythm or your lifestyle or environment or whatever, you really are out of touch with what feeling really good feels like, because you've just got used to something less than that. So the cycles, as far as I'm concerned, are based on the availability of light as much as anything. Now obviously we have less light during the winter period, gets darker later in the mornings, and of course in the summer it tends to get dark a lot later, and it's pretty light when you get up in the morning. Now I'm not suggesting for 1 minute here that you should fall asleep as soon as the sun sets and get up as soon as it rises. That would perhaps be a little silly, especially in the summer if you live somewhere where it doesn't get dark till 11 o'clock at night or something, or it gets light at 4 o'clock in the morning, then you're not going to be getting enough sleep. So I think you have to be sensible about this, and my adjustment is pretty small actually. I probably sleep from about 10 till 5 in the summer, and then I sleep from about 9 till 6 in the winter. So there's a slight adjustment there, seasonal adjustment if you will, and that's really all I need to do in order to feel like I'm keeping up with the rhythms and everything is in good condition. There's a number of things I do to help me with my sleep management, and first of all, of course, is the timing, as I've already suggested. I like to be fairly consistent with the time that I go to bed. And that first 4 hours, of course, I take very seriously, try to make sure I'm not going to get any interruptions in that time. And another thing I do prior to going to bed, at least an hour before I go to bed, is that I do not look at any screens, any computer screens, phone screens, things of that nature, because that kind of light interferes with your melatonin production. I also tend to read before I go to sleep, and what I do there is I have an orange light on over my bed so that I'm not getting that blue light. And sometimes when I'm moving around the house or doing things that require light later at night, I wear some blue light blocking glasses, so that just helps me keep the bright lights out of the way, if you will, and so then it doesn't really badly impact my melatonin production. I also make sure that my sleep environment is totally dark. I actually wear a mask. There's a special sleep mask that I use that blacks out everything. I've tried blackout curtains and things of that nature, but they don't really get the job done. But these masks, the particular one that I use, cuts out absolutely everything, and you're in total blackness, and you don't have to worry about going around the room and turning off things and pulling curtains or whatever you do. I also have some white noise going on in the bedroom. Now, whether this would be something that sounds like waves or rains or waterfall, just something that cuts out the peripheral noise. Nothing loud, just enough to be relaxing. I also use an essential oil diffuser. I like the idea of some vapor in the room, if you will. Gives a little bit of humidity, and the oils, of course, can be soothing and help you sleep as well. So at the end of the day, sleep management is really important for the Be Lean for Life protocol. If you don't get enough sleep, or you deprive yourself of sleep, it's going to affect all the other pillars within my protocol, and it's just something that you've got to get right. It's just as important as managing your stress and managing your diet and getting enough exercise and so on. So we need to take sleep management very seriously. So at the end of the day, sleep management is a very important part of my Be Lean for Life protocol. Without sufficient rest, it really makes it difficult to get the maximum benefits from all the other aspects of the program.